Hey, so in this episode, we are going to talk about the only two skills you need in life. The only two skills you need to do whatever it is you want to do, whatever it is you long to do next, whether that's a concrete goal that you're chasing or just a more abstract desire to change some things in yourself or in your life. These two skills are kind of like having a genie that allows you to wish for more wishes, or like having a money tree in your backyard, or these skills beget more skills. Beget. I'm a guy who says baguette now, not a baguette. Baguette just is like a pretentious sounding word. I don't even know where that came from. These two skills bring about more skills. Let's put it that way. These two skills bring about more skills. And so if you can just develop these two skills in your life, and we'll talk a little bit about how to start to do that, the world of possibilities kind of opens up for you. So if that sounds good to you, you're in the right place. Really glad you're here. Welcome to episode 9 of Me and the Quest. Hey, what's going on? My name is Ben. This is Me and the Quest. This exists to help you get to where you long to be in life, to do big things that you're chasing, to make big changes in yourself, to figure out how to align what it is you're here on the planet to do with your actual waking everyday life. And we do all that kind of looking at our lives through the lens of a quest, of a story, viewing ourselves more like a hero on an epic quest and kind of exploring what that can do to provide clarity and provide direction and just a sense of like excitement and positivity in our lives. So that's what the show is about. Today is a first for me. I am recording this the day before it comes out. I've been working for most of season 1 at least a week ahead. At one point I was like 3 weeks ahead, and then had some technical setbacks, recorded episodes that didn't turn out, and so I recorded them the next week. And even last week, like, I had to publish the audio podcast 2 days late for a technical reason. So I'm trying to play catch up a little bit, but this is way closer to the wire than I would like it to be. And even in the course of this day, I would try to start about 2 hours ago and had a couple things come up in my day. So, man, this is I'm pushing it, but hopefully this episode is getting to you on Wednesday morning when it's supposed to come out. I mentioned before, I think last week, that we're looking at wrapping up season 1 here before long, looking at probably a 12 episode season 1. But the end of season 1 really signifies a blossoming of the show into everything that I really want it to be. So it's not like season 1 ends and then, I say I'm going to come back in a few months and I never make another episode. It's not that at all. Season 1 is really meant to lay some groundwork so that I can build other things on top of it. So here in the coming month or so, we'll wrap up what I'm calling season 1. But then we'll start to have more interaction with guests, and I've been working on ideas for a lot more short form content that'll be on social media coming really soon, and just trying to design more places too for feedback and two-way conversation, and trying to establish more human connection where I'm not just making episodes and just throwing them out there, but that we can have start to build some community and start to build some more two-way conversation. So really excited about all that. If you're not already following the show on Instagram at Me and the Quest, and actually just to kind of tease where we're going here, I'm on TikTok too, at Me and the Quest on TikTok. Don't have a single post over there yet, but I do have like my profile picture and my handle are over there, so you'll know it's me. And then content will start showing up there very soon. So today we're talking about this idea of skills as the final part of this little 3-part mini-series about the traits of our character, our hero in the story, right? So we want to identify our gifted superpowers. What are our innate and sort of abstract gifts that we bring to whatever environment we're in, that are sort of our unique combination that we bring as a gift to the world. How can we play to those strengths? We talked about that in episode 7. Last week in episode 8, we talked about potentially fatal shortcomings, how to identify them, how to start to build a life that, as much as possible, can play to those superpowers and mitigate the negative effects of those shortcomings that we all have. And then to wrap things up in this little mini series today, we're talking about skills, this idea of developed skills. So, Star Wars is such a clear example where Luke Skywalker has some innate things about him and things he doesn't even know about himself, right? The lineage and these things he can do that make him unique. But like when he goes and trains with Yoda, that is a very clear example for me of that idea of developing the skill. So yes, the hero has some unique things that set them apart and that kind of distinguish like what it is they're in the story to do. But there still is an element of like, just because you have the gift doesn't mean that you're ready for whatever your, adventure or your calling or your mission is. You still have to develop the skills to make sure that you can fulfill that calling. In so many movies, a lot of Disney movies actually have these like montages where, the music, there's some kind of catchy little song that plays and they show the hero. Hercules and Mulan are a couple that just popped in my head without previously thinking about it, but I'm sure there's more too, where the hero is sort of seen, going from skinny and uncoordinated, and then by the end of the 2.5 minute song, they're now, buff and doing amazing things. Incredibles is another one where Mr. Incredible trains and gets back in shape. That often happens like around 40 minutes into the movie or something. We've seen the hero be their sort of weaker self, their less fulfilled self. We've seen kind of where they are being called to go, in their next step, where the movie's gonna eventually go, right? But then we get some sort of montage where they're training and they're developing that skill set and that ability to actually act in the way that they need to. So that's what we're talking about today. This idea that every hero has a developed set of skills to help them achieve what they're meant to achieve. And so that's where we're headed. Let's get into it. Act 1 of episode 9. So in this first segment of the show, we try to establish what problem we're trying to address in this episode. And so today I actually have 3 versions of a similar problem. And so I can pretty much guarantee that you can relate to, whether right now or at least at some point you have related to this idea, one of these 3 things. What's interesting about this is, like, as I look back at my own life too, like there's been times where I've related to one of this and then I kind of solve that problem, I get the skills I need. And then inevitably when you kind of move to the next chapter, move to the next mountain to climb, you can come back and kind of feel these problems again. So it's not like you kind of solve it once for life and then you're good. But actually, this is a problem that's always going to come up when you start something new, when you start the next adventure. Even if you've overcome it in the past, it has its own version of that for every story that you try to kind of act on. So let's talk about these 3 different versions of the same basic problem. So first version is you know what you want, but you don't have the skills you need, or at least you don't think you have the skills. It's like for me with this video podcast and all the things I've already experimented with the video side of things. That was a pretty good example of like I had people I really admired that were doing similar things. And so I can look at that and be like, okay, that's what I want. That's what I want to do. I want to do something like that. Or I want to do this thing that this guy does and mix it with this thing that other guy does and make it my own, bring my own unique spin on it and it'll be this. But the actual skills required to pull that off and know how to do it, I didn't really have, and I'm still very much learning, but I didn't have a very strong skill set in that at all. So in that case, I knew what I wanted, but I also knew that I didn't have the skill set I needed to make it happen. Version 2, you don't know what you want, or you're not willing to admit to yourself what you want because you don't think you have any skills. You don't think you have anything to bring to the table. So it's sort of just a shutdown, like don't bother dreaming or scheming or, adventuring toward anything because it's like, well, I don't have the skills to make it happen. So I'm just going to kind of live my life and drift, But I don't really accept that's fulfilling for most people. I don't mean to say that you always have to be doing some sort of big life-changing thing, not at all. And we all have seasons that are more just stable and kind of in it for the long haul as we raise a family or kind of build up a career or whatever. I get that. But the idea that you would just sort of perpetually think, I don't have any skills, so I'm just going to like not really even think about what I might really want deep down or what I'm supposed to be doing or could be doing right now, because I don't have the skills. I need to do whatever that thing is. So why even bother trying or wasting the emotional energy in dreaming about that? So if that's you, I hope that this episode can inspire you to get out of that rut and start to feel empowered to have some dreams, to have some goals that maybe you didn't previously have at the start of this episode. Third version of the problem is you know what you want and you are ignorant about your own skill set. So like a classic example that comes to mind is American Idol back in the day. And I'm kind of glad that culturally we got past the thinking it was entertaining to watch people that couldn't sing and like humiliate themselves. And like, we were an American Idol family. We watched most seasons as a family. I like long enough ago that I remember being out and like VHS recording episodes from those early seasons. And so like we were, like most of America, sitting around watching these people that were convinced that like they were the next big thing, and they were just horrendously, untalented at music. Maybe they had other talents, but singing wasn't it. I'm glad that like we don't culturally like think that. I don't know. It's gross and mean to kind of think about now. And it seems like I don't really watch much like singing reality shows, but it seems like they've kind of moved away from that for the most part. But it's honestly a pretty apt example of someone who knows what they want and they're just so not self-aware. I don't know the correct term. Is it not self-aware or self-unaware? Unself-aware. Not self-aware. I'm just going to go with that. They're so not self-aware that they are humiliating themselves on national TV. But as kind of uncomfortable as it might be to admit it, we've all had those times too where we think like, oh, like I'm going to do this, and just a big old pile of lack of self-awareness. And then we, eventually learn, whether over time or in one kind of harsh moment, like those people on American Idol, we learn that, oh, like I don't have that skill set. And even then, it doesn't mean that skill set can't be developed. I think in a lot of cases it can. This is a hard one because, I think I have the potential to be a good communicator, and I'm still very much working on that, but I do believe it's like in my potential. I might be wrong about that. I might be horrible at this. I don't know. Because the nature of a blind spot or a lack of self-awareness is that you don't know it. But those are the three versions of the problem. You know what you want, but you don't think, or that you don't have the skill set. Number two, you don't even allow yourself to dream or plan or chase things that might otherwise be up your alley because you're like, I don't have the skill set for that, so I'm not going to waste my time, or not going to set myself up for a failure, so I'm just going to kind of play it safe and not do anything. Version three is just you maybe know what you want, but there's just a lack of self-awareness to know whether or not that's something you can actually do, especially with like your current set of skills. So let's talk about these two skills that I mentioned at the beginning, what I think are really kind of the only two skills you might need to kind of pull off whatever it is that you really want to do. All right, so the only two skills I think you need to get wherever it is you are wanting to go. Let's start with number one. I don't think it'll be too much of a surprise for anyone who has been listening to the show. The 8 episodes so far, and even the first half of this episode is already showing up. But the first skill that I think just more and more I'm really strongly believing is just a baseline skill for all of these good things in life, to accomplish what we want, to have good, healthy, thriving relationships, to experience joy and peace and presence and all these things. I think a prerequisite for most of those and many other good things in life is healthy self-awareness. We need the ability to be honest with ourselves and to see ourselves as clearly as we can. And I'll admit that, for me, I can measure that I am a interested person. I'm very interested in myself, very interested in how I work and understanding my patterns and understanding how I'm wired. It doesn't mean I'm actually self-aware. I don't really know how to measure self-awareness. It'd be an interesting topic actually to explore at some point. We need that ability to be honest with ourselves, both the positive and the negative. I think, when you hear you got to be honest with yourself, you kind of jump to the negative, like, hey, you just got to be honest with yourself. Like, this isn't for you, right? And that is part of it. But it's also self-awareness comes down to that ability to be like, you know what, I'm good at this. Or like, you know what, like I'm happiest when I'm doing this. Or, you know what, like I'm seeing this things start to change in a positive way in me and I like it. And like, I want more of that. And less of this other thing that I see in my life that is holding me back. The more that you can see yourself accurately, we're all kind of looking in the mirror and it's smudged and it's maybe got some cracks or some fog or some dirt on it or whatever. And like, we want to kind of polish that as much as possible. And we're never going to get that perfect representation of what we're never going to see ourselves perfectly clear. But the healthier we can get and the more self-awareness we can get, the more we're going to thrive. I really believe that. And so as it relates to this idea of building skills, obviously you can't build skills when you don't know what skills you do and don't have. I think this idea we talked about in episode 7, the idea of a superpower. I think superpowers are very abstract, and I picture it sort of like a cloud or a liquid, right? It's very flowing. It's very sort of borderless. And what a skill does is it gives structure to that abstract strength we have. So, I talked about in that episode that like I view one of my superpowers as imagination. Imagination without any skill set would just result in like a bunch of creative frustration, right? Because it's like, well, I've got all this imagination, but like, where do I put it? So for me, being able to play music, for me being able to write, or the ability to like all the work I've put in, which I enjoy. It's not work for me. I'm just a nerd, but like all the books and all the podcasts and all the YouTube lectures and like all the stuff that I've been consuming for years and years, which is to me is developing a skill. All that stuff is a skill set that gives structure to my imagination. It gives my imagination a outlet. But if you don't have the skill set, but you don't even know what your superpowers are, you don't even know what your strengths are, I think starting with the idea of like, what is my abstract strength, and then how can I build a skill set that can kind of be a funnel for that, that could be a good place to start. Self-awareness and skills, another area that this overlaps, is just knowing like how good you currently are. And this is where most of the time it's that honest self-evaluation about like, I'm not, like maybe you're not quite there yet. And for me, with that true honest, neither strictly positive nor strictly negative, I'm just trying to be as honest as I can be and get as close to the truth and to reality as I can, is to look at skills that I've had where I can at once say, it's not there yet, but the potential is there. So many times with different steps in my musical progress, I've been able to see that. And sometimes I've missed it. Sometimes I've thought I was good enough and I wasn't. And I think other times probably the opposite. Sometimes I have held myself back strictly because like I actually did have the skills. I just didn't believe myself enough. So it's been both. But I can look at times where I was able to say, like, that's not quite there yet, but there's enough potential, there's enough good there, to keep investing in that. And again, that just comes down, you have to have the self-awareness. And I think with something like for me with music, because it's like it's my number one thing. It's what's been kind of at the center of my life for a long time. I feel like I've got a decent, I can say at this point, especially, it hasn't always been the case, but at this point, almost 28 years old, having played music since I was, 12. As it relates to that, I feel pretty good about my self-awareness and knowing what I'm good at, what I'm not, where I need work. But other areas of my life, less so, right? Okay, yeah. And then to get back to like the core of this show, this idea of like getting to where you want to be in life, you've got to know what that is for yourself, which is a form of self-awareness. Like, we can't build a skill set that's going to help us get to where we want to go if we don't know where we want to go. I will say, if you already have a skill set, and you do, if you're old enough to listen to this and understand the words I'm speaking to you, you have some skill sets, whether you think you do or not. Sometimes if you don't know what you want to do, start with a skill set. Like, look at what you already can do. Yeah, so maybe you can look at your current set of skills, or a different, you can take this skill that you learned at work, and you can take this skill you learned in 6th grade, and you can take this skill that's just very like innate, and you can start to compile something and find some overlap there. And maybe that will start to give you some direction about what it is you like, kind of where you want to go next in life, like what your next step is. So I think if you know where you want to go, you've got to kind of have a clear vision there, and then you can build a skill set around that, which we'll talk about that in a second, the next segment. Or if you have been listening to the show and you're kind of just putting up with it for some reason, but you don't really know what you want, I think one place to start is to start with what skills you already have, and maybe the overlap between skills you already have and things you really enjoy and that bring you life, things that play to your natural strengths. Maybe you can then reverse engineer from there some concrete goals you could work toward. All right, I feel like there's even more here, this idea of self-awareness and developing a skill set and how that all works together, but you get the idea. That's skill number 1. Skill number 2. And it's going to sound a little silly or like cyclical logic, but just stick with me because it's actually not. The second skill I want to talk about is how to learn new skills. So maybe you're like, okay, that doesn't help. That doesn't make sense. Here's a way to think about it. Think about the difference between someone who is taught in school, a set of facts that they can memorize and then take a test on, get good grades, and then forget it, versus someone who is taught how to learn. Someone who's a really good student who can just copy things like a machine, get good grades, move on to the next thing, maybe even do that all the way through and, get a couple of degrees on their wall doing that, versus someone who learns how to learn. It's sort of the classic, like, teach a man to fish or thing, right? It's like, if you and I can get good at getting good at things, if we can learn how to learn well, how to be open, how to develop discipline, how to develop patience that it takes to learn a new skill, how to get just learn our way around like resources, and like how to use the internet to maximize, like we have access to like unfathomable amounts of information, and we can learn anything we want to. But there is a skill set involved in navigating this current age of, you want to learn how to do anything, just go on YouTube and type it in or whatever. Like, there's a skill set that comes with learning how to navigate all that. If we get really good at learning how to get good at things, I know it's a little bit cyclical and a little bit like that was a letdown. Maybe it's not. Maybe you get it, but just in case, I need to convince you. Here's an example just from my own life. It's like, I'm not very good at like managing my time. I feel like I waste a lot of time. I feel like I'm not getting done what I want to get done. So like in the last few years, I've learned a lot more about time management, about productivity, about managing my energy, about the mental and emotional side of productivity, the diet, the rest. I've learned a lot about all that. And this sounds a little bit like I'm praising myself, but this is just one example where I've done it well. It doesn't mean I do it well all the time. But one example is, I had that self-awareness, that first skill, to be able to see in myself that, hey, like, I don't think I'm managing my time well or as well as I could be. I think I'm wasting some potential here. I think I'm getting frustrated that I keep making these same kind of mistakes and spinning my wheels. And then to turn that into, okay, I'm going to read more about this. I'm going to listen to podcast episodes that talk about this. I'm going to, talk with friends and people that I think are good at this and kind of pick their brain a little bit. Down the road, I definitely expect to flesh this out more. about how to develop the skill of learning new skills. And we're going to talk a little bit here in Act 3 in the next segment about kind of some practical steps you can take if this is too abstract. But just imagine if you had a bunch of self-awareness and then the ability to learn over time whatever it is you need to learn. You're kind of unstoppable. And I don't mean this in a sort of Disney Channel, you can do whatever you want to do, be whoever you want to be. I don't believe that. Like, it doesn't, and I don't think most people do if you really stop and think about what that means. Like, you can't literally be whatever you want to be. Like, we all have our circumstances, we all have our giftings, we all have our shortcomings, we all have our scenarios that we're in. Some things we've chosen, some things we haven't. And sometimes you just there are two things that exist that maybe at 15, either of those could have been true from you. And then as life goes on, that thing is no longer ever going to be possible because of things, a path you've chosen. And that's how life works. So you can't just be whatever you want to be. But I do believe that whatever it is that you are, that deep, true longing, that next step for your life, that step toward health, that step toward the thing you've always wanted to experience. If you have self-awareness and you have an ability to grow, the ability to learn, the ability to develop new skills, that pairing kind of lets you unlock all that potential. So again, we'll talk about, this conversation is not done about how to really do that. And I'm curious to hear from people too, and hear if you have any thoughts on that, let me know. But let's get into Act 3 and talk about some next steps for you after you're listening to this episode. All right, I'm excited about this little 3-step process thing that I came up with the other day. I feel like this could really be something that could be helpful. And this is something that, with so much of what I talk about here on the show, it's like I've had little successes, and these are things or failures, things I've learned from my past. But so much of this is stuff that I'm also, as I come up with these ideas and these ways of framing them, so much stuff that I'm either, I can use this today to think about things I'm working on. And I know I can use a lot of these things, in the coming days and weeks and months and years. So I know that when something excites me, hopefully it means that it can be helpful to others too. So here's what I came up with, some next steps after listening to this episode. First thing we're going to do is start with the dream, start with the goal, and don't allow yourself to edit yourself if you if you think it's like, well, I don't have the skills for that. That's the whole idea, right? So whether you think you can do it or not, whether you think you have anything at all in your arsenal that helps you get there. So hold out that dream, that goal. And now we want to make a list of skills you think you will need to make that happen. And, maybe at first it's just like a category of skills. Like, oh, if I'm going to do this, I'm probably need to get some more business skills. I need some more technical know-how. I need some more relational, interpersonal skills. It can be kind of a category, the big dream, the big goal, and then some kind of skills. So this next step, what we're going to do is we are going to kind of eliminate and shorten or consolidate that list of skills by doing a couple things. First, we're going to notice some adjacent skills that we might already have. And even when you're making kind of a big leap, a lot of times there are skills, maybe at this one thing you used to do, you got really good at navigating conflict or other interpersonal things. Chances are that's going to be really helpful at this other thing you want to do. So bring in those skills from other things that you've already done. Very rarely do you start some new thing and literally start from zero. You have a skill set. You just got to kind of think about it sometimes. And this next one's one of my favorites, but come up with ways to do that thing that you want to do in a way that doesn't require some of those skills. So at first you're gonna think well, I want to do this thing like so and so, and they do it this way, so apparently I need to learn how to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe you can get away and actually make your thing and make it better and make it more you by do X, do Y, but don't do Z. Do Z your own way. Don't do Z at all. Do W instead of Z, right? This is something I feel really strongly about with all of my creative projects is do the thing and then pay attention to what's working and what's not. Pay attention to what comes easy and what is just doesn't seem to be a natural skill at all. And then think about, like, sometimes you just have to do that thing and maybe it takes you longer than it should, or maybe it's more stressful than it should be. But a lot of times that thing that it just really isn't natural, it really doesn't feel like it's a good return on your time, because it just doesn't come naturally to you, or you just hate every second of it. A lot of times that thing doesn't have to be done, or it doesn't have to be done in that way. So already that original list of skills you need should be dwindling a little bit, because we're bringing in some other skills from other areas of our lives, and we're taking the time to really think about we're taking the time to really think about some of these things that we might not actually have to do. Like, oh, I thought I had to do it that way, but actually if I do it this way, I can play to my strengths. I can bring in a skill I already have from this other thing, and now I don't have to waste hours of my week doing this thing that I thought I had to do, but apparently I don't. Okay, so we started with the big dream out front. We made a list of some of the skills and the categories of skills we need to get to that thing. We're talking about bringing in skills that are sort of adjacent from other things that we can do, that sometimes aren't as obvious, like something like an interpersonal skill that you learned in this one environment, and now you can take it and use it in another. And we took the time to find elements of this thing that we don't actually need to do, a skill set we don't actually need to develop, because we just thought that so my mentor did it that way, so I wanted to do it that way, or I read in a book one time that you should do it this way, so I got to do it this way. It's just not often the case. And then the last step is when you get that list of skills that just unavoidably you have to develop. The way I wrote it down is just so simple. I just said, think of easy ways to learn the skills you must learn. That makes it sound just like obvious and simple, and like it's just a switch you can flip, and it's not that easy. But here's the thing, I just don't really feel bad for people most of the time that say that they don't know how to do something, because our access to information is so unbelievable, that most of the time you don't really have an excuse. I couldn't afford to go to college. YouTube is all the college you need. No offense to anyone who's in college right now. Depending on what fields you're going into, I don't actually mean that. But it's I wish someone would. I'm envious of so and so. So and so who taught themselves how to do that by going to the library. You can go check out the same books that guy checked out. I'm getting a little sarcastic. I don't know what that's about. A little punchy. I just really believe in this. Podcasts, YouTube, books, all those things can be free. Books aren't always free, but the library, you can go to an antique store and buy a bunch of books for $3. And yeah, they might smell weird and have some coffee stains on them, but they're $3. I just don't know. The access to information cannot be the reason. So could it be that the reason is that you're just scared? Could it be that you're too easily distracted? And you're probably too easily distracted because you're scared. Let's be honest. Most of us get distracted by things because it's easier to get distracted than to face our fears, to face what it is we really want to do. And so maybe that's where I'll end it. Don't let that fear keep you from developing the skills. Because if you say that, I just don't know how to learn, we have so much access to so much information. I just don't buy that excuse. I think that all those excuses around not developing the skill set or not having a skill set, it's going to come down to those couple things. It's going to come down to, I think that we do that because we're scared to put the time into developing the skills, because if we develop the skills, then we got to actually go do the thing. And it's also really easy to look at someone else's skills and think that's their superpower. So here, let me explain that, because I think that's really important. It's really easy to look at someone else's skills, something they've developed, something they were not born with, something they spent probably years, a lot of time developing. And we think, I wasn't born with that, so I can't be like them. They weren't born with it either. It all comes down to any excuse I think that you can come up with for not taking the time and the effort to develop your skill set. It's probably going to come back to that you're scared. And I get it. I'm not being accusatory because I'm there all the time. But then it just comes down to like, what kind of person do we want to be? Do we want to be the kind of person who's fine with that, with fear kind of keeping us from developing the skills we need to do the things that we really want to do, the things that we would be so good at, the things that would lead to the next good chapter in our lives? Or are we just gonna let fear box us in, hold us back? All right, got a little fiery at the end of today's episode. Interesting. I wasn't really expecting that. When I thought about this episode coming up in the idea of skills, I kind of thought it might be one of the more like sort of practical and a little bit maybe even dry episodes. But we've stumbled into a couple of my areas of passion here, so I think we've kind of that's why I'm a little fired up more than I expected to be. No epilogue today, or probably for the rest of season 1, to be honest. Few reasons for that, but this episode seems to be plenty long, I think, in itself. I'm going to do my best to hit finish here on the record and get this thing edited and up to you by Wednesday morning. So I'm not going to blabber on much more. I've done enough of that, that's for sure. Yeah, as I mentioned, make sure you follow the show on Instagram at Me and the Quest. Subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave a little comment on, especially on the podcast platforms. It does get super helpful. Helps with algorithms. It helps with kind of what they call like social proof. So if someone finds the show somehow and it has one review, that can kind of be like, well, is anyone listening? This looks like a ghost town. But if they they find the show and see a handful of reviews on there, that can kind of show that the show is a real thing. So thanks so much for listening. Be back next week with episode 10. Talk to you soon. Peace.